Mitt the Michigan Mouse. Chapter 13, Mary the Cottontail. The Cottontail was Mary, and she had Mitt firmly in her mouth. Her legs were long and swift and seemed to barely touch the ground as she made her quiet race through Greenfield Village. Mary loped past old buildings and stone houses to a farm near a patch of oak forest. Once there, she scrambled into a thicket of black huckleberry where her home was cleverly hidden. The thicket was near the barn, and Mary knew the farmer did not like her living so close to his garden. Now safe, the Cottontail tucked Mitt into a small, cozy nest where her 5 cottontail babies were waiting. Mary had round eyes set like brown colored gems upon a buff velvet face. Her nose was pink and twitching, and her ears were long and smooth. She greeted her babies by nuzzling them softly, and then told Mitt, in the loving way that cottontails will do, that he was a dear friend of Tully's, and Tully had once saved her from a red-tailed hawk. She told Mitt that Tully had asked her to find him and keep him safe. "Tully will return soon," whispered Mary. "Tully will return and take you home." Mitt stayed with Mary and her babies while the autumn landscape changed from brilliant harvest colors to shades of icy gray. Mitt did not seem to mind, for he was able to leave the thicket every day to forage for white oak seeds and witch hazel. Mary always left at dusk and dawn to feed upon woody sprigs and tree bark, returning nourished and ready to feed her babies again. During this time, Mary treated Mitt as her own, grooming and nuzzling him and teaching her babies to accept him as a brother. The babies were happy to do so, and as they napped in the nest, Mitt told the baby cottontails stories about his home, and they made soft hushing noises in return. From the thicket, Mitt watched the first snow fall upon the farmer's field. It made him sad, for seeing the ground turn white made him worry that Tully may not return. One morning, when the trees were dashed with frost, a murder of crows came flying toward the thicket. Mary stood on her hind feet, 4 paws tucked to her chest. The crows were cawing and calling, taunting Mary away from her babies. Mary grunted and gave a squeal of worry, warning the crows they were not welcome. But the crows kept at her until she went racing over the field zigzag while the crows gave chase. While Mary was working to lure the crows away from her babies, Mitt peered out of the thicket. He could no longer see Mary, but could spot the crows diving and dashing at the field, looking smaller and smaller in the distance. Little did Mitt know that on the other side of the field, there was more danger to come. I just want to show you guys where he is now. Greenfield Village is in Dearborn, Michigan, and that is way down here. So he came from Sheboygan, which is up here at the top of the mitten, and now he is down here at Greenfield Village in Dearborn. Okay, we're moving on to chapter 14, Hiska. The babies were sound asleep, and Mitt was nearly too, when scrip, scrape, scrip, scrape. It sounded as if a thin piece of tin was being scraped along the side of a tree. Scrip, scrape. The noise startled Mitt, who couldn't tell where it was coming from. Just as Mitt settled back into bed, Mitt saw 2 eyes peering into the nest. It was Hiska. Hiska the red fox was well known at the farm. Hiska had waited until his plan with the crows was underway before getting so close to the nest. Now, with Mary far away, it was time for him to snatch the tiny cottontails. The fox's lips were black and snarling, and his long toenails caught a hint of light as they swiped at the nest. But Mitt was not going to let Hiska snatch Mary's children. "There is nothing you can do, Mouse. Mary is out over the meadow, and she won't be back soon. If ever," sneered Hiska. Mitt would never forgive himself if anything happened to the babies after Mary had been so kind. Mitt secretly tore a solid twig from the black huckleberry and hid it behind his back. He had to think fast. He had to take Hiska off guard. Plotting, Mitt said, "I see you like the cottontails, Fox. Well, I will give them to you. I will gladly give them to you. But first," added Mitt, "you must sit down and listen to a story." Here's a picture of the fox looking at the little cottontails. "A story? Why would I want to listen to a story?" snarled Hiska. Because, said Mitt, trying to get Hiska to sit down, if the Cottontails wake and scream as young bunnies will do, the farmer will find us and do away with us all. If you let me tell a story, because I like telling stories and rarely have the chance to do so, I will let you take them without any fuss. The babies mean nothing to me. Taking the bluff, as Mitt hoped he would, Hiska steadied himself into a sitting position, and Mitt began his tale. There was once a sweet maid who needed a shepherd for her sheep. A bear asked for the duty. The young maiden asked him how he would call the sheep, and he said, "Grr, grr, grr." The maiden told him no, he would not be helpful calling sheep. Then came the wolf, and when the maiden asked him how he would tend the sheep, he said, "I will bite their feet." The maiden sent the wolf away, telling him that would not help a bit. Next came the bobcat, and when the maiden asked how he would tend the sheep, he said he would call them with a meow, meow, meow. The maiden shook her head and walked away, thinking she would never find a shepherd for her sheep. Mitt watched Hiska with a close eye as he told the story, making sure the fox was listening carefully before he continued. Then the maiden met a fox just like you. The fox begged to be the shepherd, and so the maiden asked him, "How will you call the sheep?" The fox replied, "I will cry, 'Hey, dilly-dally, come to the meadow,' and then I will follow them home so they are safe." The maiden liked this answer, and so hired him on the spot. But the next day, when she arrived at her cottage, her flock had been eaten. The fox had eaten every last one. He had even eaten her oats and her eggs and cleaned out a bowl of cream down to the very last drop. The maiden was very angry and took the last drop of cream and threw it at the fox, where it landed on his tail. At that, Mitt paused to look Hiska in the eyes. The fox was ready for the bait, so Mitt spoke slowly. And that is why, to this day, all foxes have a white tip on their tail. Hiska, his mouth wide open in disbelief, turned to look at his own tail, just as Mitt hoped he would. Right then, Mitt pushed the twig upright between Hiska's upper and lower jaws. It was just the right size, keeping Hiska's mouth ajar so he could do no harm. This drove Hiska wild, and he took off chasing Mitt through the farm. Mitt escaped the fox by scrambling into the barn and hiding in a pile of hay. He had saved the babies and Hiska was gone, but before he could think about how to get back to the nest in the huckleberry thicket with the bunnies, the farmer walked in and pitched the hay into his truck, then got in his seat and drove away.